know Vikings still existed.
They mostly live in Minnesota.
If that's not the best scene in all of cinema, I will eat my books. If this movie is anything like how I remember it to be when I was growing up as a kid, this will be one of the best movies that's ever been created. I remember being 5 years old. I think this might actually be the first movie I ever went to in a theater. And I just remember being immersed in the Pokemon-ness. Just Mewtwo destroying things and like Mew trying to save things. And I don't remember all the weird in-between things. But if I remember correctly, this is, in fact, the magnum opus of all Pokemon. Honestly, I just want to give it an S tier. Let's just be done with it. Let's just go home. And do we really have to do all this reviewing? And I don't know. When should we start recording?
We have them.
What? Hello, and wonderful to see you. My name is Gingy Dave, and today is our first step in our adventure in reviewing and rating every single Pokemon movie. All 23 of them. But hey, at least we're doing it together. We'll be reviewing these movies. We'll be looking specifically at 3 criterias. One is the overall plot idea. One of them will be the theme of the movie, and another part of it will be the spectacle. And we'll just kind of go around and say what was good about it and what was bad about it. The reason why we put spectacle is because, well, these are children's movies. If we were judging, let's say, Godfather 2, Shawshank Redemption, or Food Fight, we probably wouldn't have this in here. But like a good Michael Bay Transformers movie, we know exactly what we're getting ourselves into when we're watching Pokemon. You know, this moment is actually very exciting for me. Not to be overly emotional, but this movie is very nostalgic for me. I remember watching this in theaters with my dad as a kid, as I forced him to go into the theater with me. If I'm being genuinely honest, I have unbelievably good memories about this movie, and I'm really excited to rewatch such a pivotal part of my childhood after all these years. But then again, there is a part of me that is horrified to rewatch it. It's been over a decade since this movie has graced my corneas, and I am a different man now. I have a son of my own now, and I see the types of shows that he watches. I see them with a cynical eye, an eye worn down by years of excellent storytelling and plot structure. Can this movie really hold up to my standard? Can this movie truly be as good as I remember it to be? Does it have any chance at all in filling the empty hole in my heart that was carved out by years of study and life lessons?
You okay, Gingy? It's just a movie.
I don't know, Offscreen Caleb. Once we start watching this, it will forever change my view of this movie. Either good or bad. I honestly don't know if this line is worth crossing. Once we press play, that's it. I guess nothing ventured, nothing gained. Alright, let's watch this movie. Well, holy crap, where do we even start?
We're going to start with the plot.
I know that, off-screen, Caleb. I was more doing that for filler, so I could reset myself. Here is the entire plot of the first Pokemon movie. Mewtwo wakes, chooses violence, kills his dad, blows up an island, we'll come back to this later, and then immediately joins a gang. The gang, Team Rocket, soups him up in some, what the kids would call, some straight up drip, and then teaches him how to do crimes. Mewtwo, upon realizing that joining a gang is moderately problematic, destroys his drip, the gang base, and goes back to the island, and off-screen builds a mansion. Meanwhile, Ash Ketchum is fighting fully evolved Pokemon with little itty-bitty guys, and gutting them like the sheep that they are. Donphan, dead. Machamp, gone. Golem, destroyed by Thunderbolt, along with his other friends. The beating was so bad that it gained the attention of a random benefactor. Who could this strange man be? And him on an island, no less. Sending a freaking Dragonite to send his mail, Ash, Brock, and Misty are given holographic mail about a super duper secret, totally legit island that will have the best trainers duking it out. Ash, as the absolute barbarian that he is, thinks that this is a blessing from above and heads to town to take a ship to the island. Oh, and Dragonite is stopped by Team Rocket at this point. Jesse, James, and Meowth have been taking Tren. Upon getting to town, the gang finds themselves in the middle of a manufactured storm. Seeing some of the other trainers also going to New Island, Ash salivated over the thought of battling them. Lo and behold, the police and a shaman warned them that the storm was very, very bad. Barbarians don't care. Barbarians find friends to get past world-ending storms to battle teenagers. I don't know how to talk about this scene without just showing it. Ash and the gang are trying to cross the storm water, and well, they find some unlikely friends?
Strong! Oh, I think I'm gonna have one.
I didn't know Vikings still existed.
They mostly live in Minnesota.
If that's not the best scene in all of cinema, I will eat my books. The gang and Team Rocket are now at New Island. Ashbarian and his team of moral compasses head into the main chamber room where the rest of the strong trainers are resting and ready to meet the master of the island. And son of a gun, it's Mewtwo. In the span of who knows how long, Mewtwo has made his own giant megalomaniac mansion. Gotta give him props. That is some dedication to the aesthetic. Man, villains don't have that anymore. Barbarian demands to fight the Psychic type. Psychic types, of course, having advantage on Dum-Dums, so Mewtwo accepts. Meanwhile, Jesse, James, and Meowth find the super secret clone facility, and Dr. Fuji from a post-mortem videotape tells the Rockets about how cloning works. We finally get to see the plot at this point. Clones of Venusaur, Blastoise, and Charizard are made, and they look so cool, and are summoned to Mewtwo. Also, this cursed line happens somewhere in here.
There goes Alakazam!
Back to Ash and Peeps, Mewtwo stomps everyone on sight, and then captures everyone's Pokemon, including Pikachu. Ash fights his way through an army of Pokeballs and is able to save his buddy, and finds himself nestled next to the B-Story in the clone lab. Ash immediately destroys the cloning lab. All the clones and regular Pokemon are freed, and Ash leads an army of Pokemon to fight Mewtwo like the warlord he was made to be. Ash makes a brutal mistake and decides to attempt to fisticuff Mewtwo. The trainer from Palatown is swatted like the fly. He is then Deus Ex Machina'd by Mew, the originator of Mewtwo's DNA. Mewtwo blasts Mew on sight, and Mew couldn't give two poops about this, but still decides to get into a psychic and army fight with Mewtwo. The clone and regular Pokemon are fighting to the point that they can barely put up their paws anymore, and we get this honestly gut-wrenching scene where Pikachu just chooses not to fight and takes the blows. Meowth talks no Jutsu's, his own clone, and says the famous line, "We do have a lot in common. The same earth, the same air, the same sky. Maybe if we started looking at what's the same instead of what's different, well, who knows?" Oh, holy crap. I keep forgetting this movie is for 5-year-olds. Ash, finally tired of not being the main protagonist for 30 seconds, decides to go in between the two Psychic Titans and, well, would you freaking know it, gets absolutely wrecked. Wrecked in kids' movies means turned to stone. And then...
The guppy.
I was wrong. I was horribly wrong.
Did you have to eat the whole book?
Good thing I don't have to dwell on that moment for too long, as Pokemon did the Tangled thing, but a few decades earlier, and shed super magic tears and brings back our hero. Mew and Mewtwo decide, hey, maybe we can live together if people this dumb are willing to give their lives up instead of just yelling from a few feet away. Mew and Mewtwo return all the Pokemon, gather all the clones, and skedoodle out of there. But not before, and I can't stress this enough, deleting all the memories of this event from everyone who saw this. So that way, you didn't learn anything. And that's how the story ends. Let's talk about some of the goods and the bads. Just to start us off strong, one of the best parts of this movie is the very beginning. Mewtwo does an excellent job of coming in just right out the gate exactly how you wanted it to be. It's a perfect amount of just a good spectacle of him wearing this armor that's just honestly really cool looking. Even as a grown man, it's just a really cool design. And also the idea of Pokemon in armor is just pretty freaking cool. I also think the idea of giving him a reasonable justification for just what he's doing at the very beginning, especially with like being tricked by Giovanni into doing morally bankrupt things. It's pretty clever, honestly. We don't see that a lot in media today. I will say this is where the movie also kind of takes a bit of a hit. It feels to me like they wanted to make a Mewtwo story and then they kind of added Ash in maybe as an afterthought. And let me explain why I think that way. This idea of the hero's journey, which I'll be referring to just kind of throughout this talk by John Campbell, really has this idea of like, what does a hero do throughout the journey? How do they change? How do they adapt to a situation? And in the beginning, it really starts off by showing who Mewtwo is, his character, what his themes are, which is, you know, this kind of existentialism idea. And it's really good. I think it would be a really strong case. And then they kind of switch it after those initial scenes and it being Ash. And then Ash kind of goes through the hero journey. You have a call to adventure, which is Dragonite. You don't really have an ordinary world. It's kind of where it suffers. I'll get back to that point in a little bit. But Ash's theme is not contradictory to Mewtwo's theme of kind of this existentialism, do I belong? Ash's theme is much more this idea of, can Pokemon be servants and also not be like a master-servant relationship? And what I mean by that is that, can a Pokemon and a person truly be friends versus one serving the other? Or one only being served and one only being the master? And that's his hero's journey. And we see a culmination of that really well done, honestly, at the very end, where Ash gives his life for Pikachu, and we find this moment of like Ash truly becomes friends, or at least shows that he is friends with Pikachu. Again, this is his journey. I feel like he's always had that though. He didn't learn to be friends with Pikachu by the end. It was kind of already in him the entire time, so the theme doesn't ask the question to be answered. It already has the answer for Ash. So that's why it's more intriguing with Mewtwo, where Mewtwo doesn't have the answer of why does he belong, do creatures like him belong in the world? That question is kind of more ambiguous, and so it leads to you wanting to know more about it. It leads you to wanting the answer to that question. So in Mewtwo's case, it's a much more interesting story because Mewtwo doesn't know the answer. And again, with Ash's theme, you also have this moment of, you already know the answer. Like, yeah, he's already friends with Pikachu, so it's not as engaging as you want it to be. There's also a weird meta-narrative that's happening in the background, which is an anti-violence message. This is just strange to me. There would be one more theme other than the two themes. Again, this movie is like an hour and 15 minutes long. You can't really talk about three themes and answer all three themes well in that amount of time. And especially like where Ash's friendship with Pikachu is moderately based off of battling. So you have this, that for sure is a bit antagonistic to Ash's theme of friendship, when you have this anti-fight message kind of almost thrown at the end very haphazardly. Happens really quickly. That part at the very end, the part where the Pokemon and the clones are fighting each other, is also a bit of a weird misstep for me, because you have this moment where it could be this grand spectacle. It could be this really cool imagery of, you know, laser beams and hyper beams and solar beams and all of this kind of stuff. And instead it's this very gritty bite claw. And I get the idea of that. It just doesn't look good on camera. It doesn't, when you buy a ticket to see a Pokemon movie, you buy a ticket to see battling and Pokemon. That's the whole premise of Pokemon. So again, to make it an anti-battling message is just really, really weird. Going back to one of my earlier points with Ash's theme, Ash's hero's journey starts off with almost immediately to a call to adventure. We don't really get to see an ordinary world or where Ash and Pikachu are and all this stuff. A lot of that is implicit, and it doesn't do you a lot of service. If you've never seen Pokemon, never heard of Pokemon, and this is your first time coming into the movie theater for Pokemon, like my father was, like my dad, you would be so confused. There'd be no stakes in any of this because you don't know any of the characters. The beginning, this Act 1, this ordinary world, sets up the idea of like what the stakes are and why they're important. And if you don't know the characters, if you've never heard of Ash or Pikachu or Brock or Misty or any of these people, then that is completely lost on you. Ash's death scene, for me personally, super heartfelt. I genuinely, in the theater, I'm sure I cried at that scene because I knew the characters. If you were to just take it at the movie at face value, this scene doesn't hit at all. Now, for me, who has watched all these, all the animes and for sure season 1 at that point of time, this was a very, very huge, impactful moment, but only because I had the setup of the ordinary world in season 1 of Pokemon. And if we're reviewing a movie, that doesn't feel right to do. You could talk about it being a multimedia idea, and a lot of things are now multimedia productions. But if you're taking it at face value, is it a good movie? The ordinary world part is so important to do, and they just simply didn't do that. And so you have these weird moments of like, this should be impactful, and it is not. Going back to that final scene, that climax, that giant fight scene, I keep forgetting about this. The main fight between Mewtwo and Mew is just simply a pink ball and a blue ball, and they're hitting each other over and over again. And it just, it doesn't really stretch the imagination. And it's really a shame. I feel like there's some really amazing parts in this movie. The scene with Pikachu crying and all the Pokemon crying, super heartfelt. Even if you didn't know who these Pokemon were, you have an idea of like animals are generally good, I guess. That's probably a idea for another day. But like watching an animal cry over someone, you already feel something. I think the beginning with Mewtwo is just really stinking good. The other thing is like, there's clearly some liberties with humor and stuff. One of my favorite and least favorite scenes has to be the Minnesota Vikings. I can't stress this enough how much I love that scene, but it just takes you out of it so quickly that I don't know what to do with that. So there's some writing issues, there's some plot discrepancies, there's for sure this weird like theme part that it makes you want to think that it's Mewtwo, but they really push that it's Ash's theme being drawn. And I think those are, if I were to say like how quickly my critiques were, I think that would be as succinct as I could get it down. I think those are the main parts that I would want to talk about. And there you have it. That is everything there is to do about Pokemon, the first movie. We can finally put it on the tier list.
Well, I was actually looking it up, and it looks like there was a short put on before the Japanese release that they didn't bring over to America.
What? Okay, so you're telling me that the American showing of Pokemon, the first movie, left out one of the biggest pieces of justifications for Mewtwo's actions because of screen time considerations, as well as hoping to streamline the movie to make it more accessible?
Yep.
Oh, so we're dumb now. So we just take stupid pills now. I cannot stress enough how this little short changes how I feel about this movie. It's absolutely hits way closer to home that this movie is Mewtwo's hero's journey and not Ash's. In fact, this sets up the ordinary world scene that I was just complaining about before and changes the stakes of the movie. If you have not watched that short before, please do yourself a favor, watch it. The tone of the movie changes. Shoot! Just thinking about it now, I'm sure that if I were to do a deep dive into the English localization of this movie, we could find some other treasures. I wonder what else about this movie that I just had no idea was happening when I was a kid. So I looked up some differences in the localization, and I gotta tell you, there's a lot of them. But for the sake of brevity, I'll name some minor changes. All of Mewtwo's lines in the English localization are about gaining power and ruling the world, and the lines in the Japanese version are more matching the theme of what is my purpose, so no big deal, no big deal. I'm freaking out! This is amazing! I get why they didn't want to harp on this theme when you're specifically marketing to 5-year-olds and their parents, but man, I am so glad that somewhere in the world, some kid had their mind completely blown out of their brains. Well, you know what? All in all, I really am glad I rewatched this movie. I was a bit apprehensive at first, but even though it didn't live up to the memory that I had of it, I gotta say all these weird beats and moments in this movie really make it, well, charming. It was fun to relive this. Well, thanks for watching, guys. This was...
You still have to put it on the tier list.
I remember this movie so fondly. And it is truly impossible for me to take my emotions out of how I feel about this. Rating the movie for purely as it is, as objectively as I can, seems almost like a disservice to my younger self. I cannot express to you how much this movie meant to me when I was a kid. I also can't give it a high tier ranking, only based on my childhood experiences. There are too many just random errors and continuous faux pas. I mean, they get Alakazam's name wrong, for goodness sakes. And how in the world am I supposed to give it an S movie that does a Minnesota Vikings line? But then again, how do I not? You know what? I can't take my childhood out of this. And I can't say in good conscience that this is the best movie of all time, which is what my younger self would say. What I can say is that this is a flawed movie that has moments of genuine greatness. And for that, I give it a B tier.